We are joined by Ms. Claudia Brown, founder of Claudia Counseling, and she's here to speak to us about ADHD in adults and how factors like toxic positivity can negatively impact our nervous system. Ms. Claudia Brown is a mental health practitioner registered with the Health Professions Council of South Africa. She provides online counseling sessions to adolescents and adults in need of psychological support, guidance, and a helping hand at discovering resilience. Claudia Brown, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon.
Hello and good afternoon. Thank you so much for reaching out to me and for allowing me the opportunity to contribute to such a very important topic. I'm very passionate about mental health and bringing mental health awareness. So I do find this opportunity as an honor and a privilege. And I appreciate the chance to just share my insights, and hopefully it will bring clarity, support, and encouragement to all the listeners. And thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's get into our first question. Claudia, I know that ADHD is common among young children, but how would you define ADHD in adults?
Let us start with defining what ADHD is and what it stands for. So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And according to the DSM-5, which is our Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and I'm referring specifically to the 5th edition, it states that in adults, ADHD is classified as a neurodevelopmental disorder, and it is characterized by consistent patterns of inattention and or hyperactivity, impulsivity that interferes with the client's daily functioning. It is very important to also just emphasize in this conversation that as registered counselors, we do not diagnose clients. Our role is to contain, to screen, and to refer when necessary, especially when we observe symptoms that may point to a possible diagnosis, a psychopathology, or the need for intensive interventions beyond our scope of practice. These interventions may include psychotherapy or prescription of medications, especially when clients are unable to cope with the symptoms and it seems to get worse. So within our scope of practice as registered counselors, we focus on containing symptoms by ensuring they do not get worse. We provide psychological interventions that equip clients with coping skills and techniques that help them to manage these symptoms and to just avoid it from escalating. So what does ADHD look like in adults? So there's two very important factors. It's even in the definition itself. It's inattention and hyperactivity. So we speak about inattention. This speaks to the difficulty sustaining focus, struggling to complete or commit to tasks, forgetfulness with important responsibilities, frequently misplacing items needed for tasks, or just simply failing to follow through with commitments and drifting off during conversations is the inability to pay attention. And when we speak about hyperactivity, we speak about fidgeting, and we often see this in children, and we often say the kids are hyper, it's hyperactivity. So this would be the fidgeting in adults, the restlessness, feeling constantly on the go, having to do several things at once, their mind are all over the place, they're talking rapidly, difficulty remaining seated when expected. So it's just the inability to slow down, the inability to just focus and not be visibly disruptive in crowds where it's perhaps silent and everyone is seated, and then we have client that can't remain seated up and down. And so yes, the hyperactivity is what it look like in adults. And so what are the classifying factors for ADHD to diagnose an adult? According to the DSM-5, there must be clear evidence that the client's behaviors is significantly impaired and they really can't function throughout the day. The symptoms must occur two or more settings. So, for example, you see the hyperactivity and the inattention in the workplace, and you see it in the household, so it need to be present in 2 places or more. The symptoms must also not be explained by another diagnosis. For example, anxiety or depression, where there might be overlapping symptoms, but the only explanation would then be to be diagnosed with ADHD. So it shouldn't be better explained by another disorder.
Thank you so much for breaking it down for us. It's much clearer now, knowing that there is a vast difference between ADHD in adults and children. My next question is, what does ADHD stem from, and what are some of the long-term effects it may have on an individual?
Yes, so there are many factors that contribute to the onset of ADHD. I would say right at the top of the list would be genetics play a vital role. So ADHD often it runs in families, and we often see individuals with ADHD symptoms would have gotten it from family members, because there might be more than one family member in that group that has ADHD symptoms. So genetics plays a key role. I can also think of neurobiological factors that play a role, so the structure of the brain. So it's interesting because research has shown that there is a difference in the brain structure and functioning in areas that are responsible for attention and impulse control of someone with the symptoms of ADHD, as opposed to someone who does not have symptoms of ADHD or has been diagnosed with the disorder. There is a difference in the brain structure, which I found very interesting in research. I would also say environmental factors also play a role in the onset of ADHD. So, for example, being exposed to trauma, being exposed to childhood adversities and chronic stress can lead to the onset of ADHD, as well as prenatal exposures. Perhaps mom has been smoking or drinking during pregnancy, that can then cause onset of ADHD for the child leading up to adulthood as well. So if you think of the long-term effects of ADHD, I would say it definitely has an impact as an adult. It has an impact on your mental health. So it could lead to other mental health disorders. So, for example, depression, anxiety, and even substance abuse due to the inability to control or to cope with your behaviors and your impulsivities. I would say it also have an effect on your social circles. So withdrawing yourself from friends and family because of your behaviors, because of the inability to control it. I would say rejection, stress, and challenges in peers, relationships, or family interactions. It can also have an effect on your financial difficulties. So poor financial planning, reckless spending, and instability. I would say a long-term effect also include relationship strain, which is tied into social circles, communication issues, difficulty maintaining long-term connections. And one of the most important impacts could also be educational impact, so poor grades and causing to higher dropout rates, and learning difficulties. So yes, it definitely has a long-term effect, unfortunately. But with the proper interventions, counseling, skills, and techniques, it is manageable, and clients are able to overcome these stresses, to avoid it from becoming a long-term effect.
I must admit though, I don't know much about therapy because of the household I grew up in. But thankfully we have a show like Saki Sizwe, Building the Nation, to educate us about the important topics around mental health and human rights, etc. When does ADHD first become notable in adults, and does one have to consult a psychiatrist first before a psychologist?
ADHD often becomes more noticeable in adulthood once responsibilities increase. So in childhood, ADHD can be easily masked because children adapt to the environment and their behaviors are often dismissed as, it's just a child being a child when they are, in a hyperactivity state. And so it's not really noticeable in childhood. But in adulthood, the demands of work, financial planning, and long-term relationships makes the symptoms far more evident. and visible, because as adults we are almost expected to be able to adapt to these new life demands as opposed to children. And so as registered counselors, our role is not to diagnose, as I've mentioned earlier, but it is to contain the symptoms and to ensure that they do not worsen. So this means equipping our clients with practical coping strategies and techniques and skills and lifestyle adjustments that will help them to manage their daily challenges. And so what does this really look like in practice? For me, I would focus on techniques that will help clients focus. So guiding clients to work on one task at a time and encouraging them to use alarms and reminders and to schedule their daily tasks and activities that they have planned throughout the day. And so that will essentially help them to stay on track. In terms of the hyperactivity, so being hyper, the restlessness and all of those additional symptoms, I would encourage to have that energy enforced into positive hobbies and healthy hobbies and coping mechanisms. So I would encourage jogging, sports, and just to channel that restlessness into something healthy and not something that's constructive, right? And so I would also introduce fidgeting tools, so having a stress ball or similar aids to manage the energy during task. Lifestyle adjustments I would encourage as well. So for sure, limiting the caffeine and limiting sugar and just practicing meditation, prioritizing sleep, and also maintaining consistent routines. It's very important for someone with these symptoms to reduce stress and pressure. And so reducing distractions is also very important. So silencing headphones would be essential for someone that are easily triggered by noise or distracted by noise. So silencing headphones and creating a quiet workspace to be able to be much more efficient and productive within the working environment. So that's just a few tools that I share that I'd use in a counseling session with a client portraying symptoms of ADHD and just helping them contain these symptoms.
Interesting. So it is rather advisable to consult with a medical practitioner first if your symptoms are severely interfering with your daily functioning, and from there an official diagnosis and treatment plan will be made. Fantastic. I've got a relative with ADHD and he is about my age. Now, from what I've observed, he cannot sit in silence for too long, so he distracts himself with music. This brings me to my next question. How exactly does ADHD affect an individual's work or academic performance?
Yes, correct. So individuals with ADHD symptoms or diagnosed ADHD often need to occupy themselves with music just so that they are able to remain focused on the task that they are doing and not be distracted by external stimuli, because once that happens, their mind will then go adrift and they'll focus on something else and then something else, and then before you know it, there's a whole bunch of unfinished tasks or commitments. And so how it affects an individual's work is that they are unable to finish their work, they are unable to commit to deadlines. And so yes, music, it is a really positive way of coping with these symptoms or avoid them from not completing tasks.
Am I correct in saying that toxic positivity can be linked to ADHD?
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. There definitely is a link. And some people may tell individuals living with ADHD that it's a privilege to have so much energy, that they can accomplish more in 24 hours than others. But for the client, for the individual diagnosed with ADHD or expressing symptoms of ADHD, this experience is often far from positive. What may look like boundless energy on the outside can actually be deeply disruptive to the daily functioning of the client. For many adults with ADHD, the reality is that all they want is to rest, to switch off, and to find calmness. Yet doing so naturally can be extremely difficult. So instead of feeling empowered by the energy, they may feel exhausted, overwhelmed and unable to regulate themselves. And you can only imagine what that could feel like. So this is where the concept of toxic positivity becomes harmful. So by framing ADHD symptoms as a gift without acknowledging the challenges, the risk invalidating the lived experiences of clients. So true support means just recognizing both the strengths and the struggles and helping individuals develop coping strategies that allow them to manage their energy in ways that promote balance and well-being.
Absolutely. If we look at low-income communities, factors like black tax can add on to toxic positivity, right? For example, in a case where an individual becomes a sole breadwinner and sometimes the burden becomes too much to bear. And instead of the individual speaking up and saying, well, this is becoming too much for me to bear by myself, he or she suppresses all of that emotion. How severe can toxic positivity become, and how detrimental is it to our nervous system?
Wow, yes. This is a very important question and a very sensitive issue for us as South Africans, and also just for everyone all over the world that has this responsibility. So black tax, it refers to the financial and emotional responsibility that many individuals carry to support the extended family, while also managing their own careers and households. And while rooted in cultural values of care and community, black tax can create extensive stress that impacts an individual's mental health. So for those living with ADHD or other mental health challenges, the weight of black tax can be especially heavy, because the constant pressure to provide, even when resources are limited, may lead to other mental disorders, such as we spoke about earlier, anxiety, depression, and other stress-related disorders. So it becomes even more harmful when individuals feel that they cannot express themselves honestly, or when they are afraid to say that they cannot financially assist, or the fear of the responses that they may receive if they set boundaries. So this silence and suppression that individuals may feel or keep the nervous system in a heightened state of stress. Over time, it can contribute to physical health risks. So you can develop high blood pressure, sleep disturbances, and other stress-related illnesses. So as a counselor, it is important to validate these experiences and not to minimize them. We must create a safe space where clients can explore the emotional and financial strain of black tax, learn to set healthy boundaries, and develop coping strategies that protect both their mental and physical well-being.
One last question before we let you go: where can people get hold of your services, and which counseling do you specialize in?
Thank you so much for allowing me to just be part of this important conversation today, and for just, engaging in this topic and just bringing a mental health awareness to our listeners. And so thank you so much for this opportunity. And individuals can get hold of me through various platforms. I'm Claudia Claudine Counseling, and they can reach me through email, which is claudiaclaudinecounseling@gmail.com, or by phone on 076-908-2396. I'm also very active on social media platforms, so Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, where I share regular psychoeducational content. So you can find me under the handle Claudia Claudine Counseling. And thank you once again for your time and just the questions and engagement, and allowing me to just bring awareness to ADHD and mental health.
Claudia, it's been such a pleasure having you with us. Thank you for sharing this insightful information. It is rather quite important that we take note of these factors going forward. Thanks again for joining us, and thank you for serving your community. Well, everyone, that brings us to the end of our interview. If you are interested in any of the services by Claudine Counseling, you're more than welcome to send them an email at claudiacounseling@gmail.com.
And there you have it. So that also concludes today's edition of Sakisi's We're Building the Nation podcast. So next up is the news.